When you hear a woodpecker drumming, do you assume it's just looking for bugs? What if I told you that drumming is actually a secret language and sometimes it's not even a woodpecker?
Imagine putting up a simple wooden box in your yard and saving one of America's most dazzling ducks along the way. Let's talk about how to get nest boxes ready for springtime.
So, before we get started with this question of the week, I think we need to acknowledge the elephant in the room. Some of you might be noticing that, as Phoebe on Friends once said, Dustin and I both kind of have our sexy phlegm voices activated at this point, which could only mean that spring asthma season has arrived, right?
All I heard is you say you think my voice is sexy.
Well, of course I do. Anyway, with that said, you'll have to excuse us if we're a little hoarse this week. It's just the nature of this time of year for both of us. But as I mentioned in the intro, when you hear a woodpecker drumming in your yard, you might not realize that it's not just looking for bugs. It's also communicating. And that hammering sound you hear might not always be what you think. So, Dustin, can you clue us in? What's really happening when you start hearing the sound of a woodpecker drumming on the trees around you?
Well, most people assume woodpeckers are just hunting for bugs, but drumming is actually part of their signal calling. They use it for lots of stuff, to claim territories, attract mates, and defend their space, just the same way songbirds use their voices. And longer daylight triggers this behavior, just like all the other birds. They start to seek out resonant surfaces. It could be a hard hollow tree, a metal gutter, even a street sign.
So, can you answer for me? Why do they drum instead of singing like the other birds do?
It's a tool that they have. Woodpeckers don't have as developed a vocal cord, and it's not clear if they developed the drumming and therefore de-emphasized the physiology of needing vocal cords, or if their physiology without vocal cords helped them adapt to their drumming. But because they lack this, they use their beaks, which is a great tool for eating and for managing bugs, but it's also a great tool for noise making too.
That's wild. I had absolutely no idea before we started researching this segment for this week that woodpeckers make that sound for any other reason than looking for bugs within the bark of trees.
That's right. And fun fact, the female woodpeckers also drum to signal to the male, which is a little bit unique. Most of the songbirds, the females don't call that way.
Interesting. Okay. So you mentioned that they're using this drumming as a type of communication. Are there like different styles to it or what?
Yeah, different species have distinct drumming styles, and they have different methods that might sound differently depending on what they're doing at the time. So we can hear through some examples, and let's see if you can guess between what's a downy woodpecker versus a pileated woodpecker.
Okay.
There's the first one. And here comes the second one. All right, so sometimes they just won't stop.
I know.
As you might have heard, downies have a fast, even sounding drum, kind of like a snare drum. That was the second one that we heard. And the first one was a little slower with deeper booms because they have a thicker drumstick, so to speak, a much bigger bill.
Yeah, they're very distinctive. The minute you hear them kind of together, you can immediately tell that there's a difference between the two of them.
Yeah, and I picked two of our more common, more kind of iconic woodpeckers that many people see, especially here in the Northeast. But there's over 20 species of woodpeckers and sapsuckers across the U.S., so there's a lot of different drumming patterns and different styles. And like we'll talk about, sometimes they're drumming to communicate, sometimes they're drumming to look for bugs and hunt, sometimes they're drumming to set a trap for food in the future, or even storing food for next winter.
So I know we hadn't planned on talking about this particular aspect of it, but do woodpeckers migrate or are they around all year round in the north?
In our area, most of our woodpeckers stick around and they're non-migratory. There are some that are shorter distance migrants. Some yellow-bellied sapsuckers migrate, but some stick around for the winter. But in general, ours are resident.
And for the common woodpeckers that you find in our area, like the downy woodpecker, and what was the other one, the pileated?
Here in the Northeast, we typically think of 5 woodpeckers as being kind of the maximum. So downy and hairy woodpeckers are the small ones, then yellow-bellied sapsucker, northern flicker, and pileated woodpecker.
I love the northern flickers. They're beautiful. So do they all kind of hang out in like forest areas? I would imagine that's where they live.
They do, but they maintain different territories. Pileated, for example, they primarily like the forested area, but they will wander out into the open. We get them in the yard now and then. But downy woodpeckers love the edge habitat, and they love to hang out in mixed flocks with chickadees and titmice and things like that. So we see a lot more downy woodpeckers on the bird feeders than anything else.
Okay, so my next question is, all this drumming, how are they bashing their faces against trees all day long and not ending up with like a concussion?
Their physiology is made for this. They've developed over time to literally protect their brains in spite of all that drumming. So woodpeckers have sort of special bone that's a little more spongy than other birds. They have a particular bone called a hyoid bone stabilizer, and they even have retractable tongues. So that hyoid bone wraps around the skull and kind of helps stabilize their brain through all that pecking. And their tongue retracts behind their skull, almost wraps around the inside of their skull, creating an extra like shock absorption.
That's really neat.
Fun fact, scientists have even studied woodpecker anatomy to help improve the science behind helmets and concussion prevention.
No kidding. That's wild.
Yeah, not only that, they've compared sort of the brain damage from athletes with like CTE compared to the protein deposits in woodpeckers, and woodpeckers simply do not develop the same kind of head trauma the way that athletes do. Now, it could be that their lifespan is just much shorter, so they don't have time to develop that. They only live to maybe 5, 7, 10 years maybe on the outside. But so far, there's no evidence of any kind of brain damage from woodpeckers.
That's amazing. So if woodpeckers are using drumming as a form of communication, then that means that other woodpeckers are understanding what those birds are communicating. But what about other birds and other animals? Like, for example, with songbirds, if a songbird does an alert call, other species of songbirds might at least recognize that that's an alert call, right?
Yeah, the main thing is that competing woodpeckers start to recognize this, and if they want to steal a hole that's already been started, they might recognize the work of another woodpecker and kind of jump in, especially a bigger woodpecker or one that needs to make a bigger hole. But then other species like starlings and squirrels even listen for woodpecker drumming as a way to find a nest hole for themselves or to usurp a whole nest hole. And then surprisingly, drumming isn't just for woodpeckers. Blue jays are great mimics. We've talked about them mimicking red-shouldered hawks before, and even Cooper's hawks and stuff like that. But blue jays can also mimic the drumming of woodpeckers, which can help them delineate a territory for themselves and keep some woodpeckers away.
That's interesting too. All right, I have another question for you that we didn't plan for, because I love my pop culture. Woody woodpecker. What kind of woodpecker is Woody woodpecker? Do you know?
I would guess he's sort of a hybrid, but mainly pileated woodpecker because he's got the big, looks like red hair, but it's kind of mixed in with the coloration of a red-headed woodpecker, but with the body shape and sort of dominance of a pileated woodpecker.
And the like pointiness of his head too.
Yeah, on the backside.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So those of you in the comments, if we're wrong about that and you know Woody woodpecker to be a different kind of woodpecker, let us know in the comments because I'm curious if we're right.
Yeah, and a lot of people think like a woodpecker drumming at their house, they might have bugs in their siding and stuff. It's not necessarily that. It could just be defining their territory. So don't worry, but do take a look. And if the woodpecker is coming to the same spot on the house all the time, that might be a bigger sign of bugs under the shingles or something.
Yeah, we hear them every once in a while on our house, for sure, especially up in this top corner because it's near some trees in our backyard. And when I'm sitting here working at this desk, I sometimes will hear them for sure.
All right. So a question for you, the audience. Have you ever been fooled by a bird or even another animal using sound to trick its rivals? Share your stories with us in the comments.
Yeah, and if you've got a birding question that's got you stumped or just something that you'd like to see content creators like us covering on YouTube, Also, please feel free to drop it below in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more feathery mysteries uncovered. So, what if I told you that putting up a simple wooden box could single-handedly save one of North America's most dazzling ducks, and that right now is the critical time to get ready, and also one of Dustin's favorite times of the year. So, Dustin, we're going to dive into nest boxes today, specifically talking most about wood ducks, right? Can you tell us why nest boxes are so important for wood duck populations everywhere?
Yeah, this is my sweet spot, so bring it on. So in the early 20th century, a lot of birds were in massive decline, partly because of hunting, partly because of the feather trade, and those are the things that prompted us to pass the North American Migratory Bird Treaty to protect a number of species. But waterfowl are hunted a lot, and so not all waterfowl are protected. Wood ducks are one of them. On top of that, we also have a natural cavity crisis, where especially homes built along waterfront habitats, well, we do a very good job of removing the trees to protect our view, and when there's a dying tree, we remove those too. So that left a lot of birds, particularly wood ducks and other waterfowl, without a place to nest because they can't make their own holes. They typically use rotted tree cavities and enlarged woodpecker holes from prior nesting behavior that have gotten bigger inside of dead trees all the time. And so we don't have those natural cavities. It literally was a crisis. So when this crisis was identified, folks decided to try putting up unnatural cavities in order to replace those nest box cavities. And the efforts for this really started in the 1920s and 1930s, and it has proved overwhelmingly successful. Wood ducks in particular in the Northeast, as well as some other species like common mergansers and further down south, black-bellied whistling ducks, all have adopted man-made nest boxes. So let's talk about it.
So how did nest boxes become this lifeline for wood ducks, and what made you decide that you wanted to get involved?
Early in my birding career, when I had read that this was a beneficial practice for ducks, I realized that there were not that many wood ducks on our lake, and I wanted to do whatever I could to support that species. And it turns out it's not just for that species. They're also keystone tenants. Even after they abandon a nest area, those later get reused by owls, mergansers, even squirrels. So I knew that I could support more than just the wood ducks. The other thing is that old growth forests, especially here in New England, have been decimated for housing development and for other purposes. So it's a conservation win. Once we learned that boxes helped populations rebound, and the science has shown from what was believed to be less than 100,000 wood ducks in the U.S. to around 3 million today. So it's been very, very productive. And then there's an ecosystem ripple effect as well. Abandoned nests provide shelter for up to 27 other species, including pileated woodpeckers, screech owls, even flying squirrels, which are fun. So cavity nesting birds are obligate secondary users. They can't excavate their own holes, so they're totally dependent on what's available. That's where we come in. We make more nest spaces available, which increases their production rate.
All right. So, okay, sounds great. I'm in. Some of our viewers might be like, this is awesome. How do I help? So walk us through, what are the must-do tasks? It's early spring. What's urgent right now?
Right now is actually early egg season laying. So even though it's still March, there's 3 eggs already laid in one of the nest boxes. So it's really important in sort of like in our area, as soon as ice is out, it's important to clean out the debris from prior years if you weren't able to already. Wear your gloves, sometimes wear a mask if there's a lot of stuff. A lot of nest boxes have squirrel activity or mice activity for over the winter. You don't want to be breathing that stuff in. It's also time to replace any predator guards that might have been brought down during the winter. It's also important to inspect for damage. You have to repair any cracks, any places where water could get in, reinforce hinges, and ensure those drainage holes at the bottom of the box are clear so any rain that does come in, any water that does come in during a heavy rainstorm has a place to exit. And lastly, once everything's ready to go, add in some brand new fresh wood shavings. I prefer aspen, never pine, because aspen simply doesn't absorb water as well as pine does. So aspen shavings are the way to go.
Okay, so that's early, like what, February, March?
Yeah, late February, early March is the best time to do all that stuff in our area, depending on the ice out as well.
Okay, so now we're getting into early April. What happens next?
Yep, so some years the laying doesn't start to early April. Some years it starts even before that. But it's important to make sure that those predator baffles are in place. And remember, even though the egg laying season might have started, that's a brief activity that just happens in the morning. So there's still time to fix up a predator guard or any minor box repairs. But once there's eggs in there, I would never risk knocking the box down or anything like that. So make sure it's secured, attached securely. Next is I keep some Wi-Fi cameras in a couple of my boxes. This is great. It's really changed the game. I like to use Amazon Blink cameras because they are battery operated and accessible to my Wi-Fi. But that also means at this time of year, it's important to make sure the cameras are in good working order, the batteries are fresh, the lenses are wiped clear, and everything is ready to go. I like to install those Nest cameras before the hen starts coming in for the laying season so that it's there and it doesn't just appear partway through. It's important to keep good records, especially of your egg dates. And this is important because if you know when eggs are laid and you know how they are laid, 1 egg per day, it allows you to do the math and backtrack into when the first egg was laid, even if you weren't able to monitor that box every day. So for example, well, the reason birds do this is they don't have enough space in their bodies to store up. For example, wood ducks may lay 12 or 15 eggs in a clutch inside that box. They don't have space to store all of those, so their body literally creates 1 egg per day and they lay it in the morning. And then they come back, they do not start incubating it right away because if they did, that first egg would hatch before the last egg hatched. They would start hatching one at a time. And if they lay an egg per day and they only hatched 1 per day, well, you'd end up with 1 hatchling that's 15 days old before that 15th egg hatches. And that 15-day-old hatchling would die of starvation first. So they don't start incubating until all the eggs are laid, and they incubate them all together simultaneously so that they hatch on the same date. So keeping good records allows you to monitor infrequently, but still be able to track back to when the first egg and the last egg was laid. For example, if I go and check a nest box today and there's 5 eggs in it, I know probably that egg 5 was laid this morning and egg 4 yesterday morning and 3 the day before it. I can backtrack to when that first egg was laid. Then if I monitor this box again, say 2 weeks from now, and I know that I find that there's a maximum of 15 eggs, by knowing when the first egg was laid and by knowing how many eggs were laid in total, I have the complete range. And then roughly when that last egg was laid is when the incubation starts. And that day plus 30 is when to expect those eggs to hatch.
Okay, so I have a question about this. Now, I know when you are taking care of the nest boxes for bluebirds and tree swallows, you go up and check on those boxes twice a week?
Yes.
How frequently are you checking wood duck boxes?
Once a week or once every 10 days or so.
Okay.
And that's partly dictated by the clutch size, because bluebirds are only going to lay 5 eggs. If I only go once every 10 days, I could go once and see 0 eggs, and I could go 10 days later and see 5 eggs. I would have no idea when the first one was laid, when the last one was laid. And if I went that long in between visits, I might find a house sparrow had taken it over and built a nest and laid eggs. I want to avoid that. So they operate on smaller time scales. Ducks are much different. They lay an egg a day for about 2 weeks. Then once the clutch is full, they incubate for about 30 days. So it's really just important to check frequently enough that you can do that math to figure out your first egg date and find out the last egg date so that you can hone in on when to expect a jump day.
Okay. And then the other thing I want to ask, because I hear you talk about it during the season, and I think it's an important point for our viewers, is you are very careful about when you go to those wood duck boxes to check the eggs once they're being incubated, right?
Yeah, although I'm as careful as I can be. It's an imperfect science. Once incubation starts for wood ducks and most any other waterfowl that you could have in these boxes, they essentially incubate those eggs for like 22-ish hours per day. Mm-hmm. So basically 24 hours a day, except they leave for a break in the morning for about an hour, usually soon after sunrise, and in the afternoon around 3 or 4 p.m. And having a camera in the box is great because not only could I check the live cam to see if the hen is in the box right at that moment, I can also get a feel for her normal pattern and see if she flies away between 3 and 3:45 every day. I know that's a good time to check without having to, pull up the live feed all the time.
You've been doing this for a while. Any pro tips that you have for any viewers who are going to give it a shot and try to set up nest boxes for wood ducks?
You can't always know if there's a hen there or not because not every box has a camera in it. So if you do happen to check a nest box using best practices and there is a hen on it, don't get pooped on. When a hen is startled, she will leave the box promptly and often defecate on her way out as a defense mechanism.
Good for her. Good for her.
If you don't know that's coming, you might get pooped on.
Hey, if I had 15 babies to take care of and I'm in the box doing my job as a mama and you were bothering me, I'd poop on you. I absolutely would.
That's right. But there's some other tips too. So first is, don't let your boxes fall into massive disrepair. They don't like that. And they don't like super new boxes either. And they don't imprint on their boxes. So a poorly maintained box that's used this year could get abandoned next year. So do a good job of keeping them well maintained. Similarly, wood ducks will abandon a box that has been impacted by predators. So if you have any sign of predation, it's important to make sure those predator guards are maintained. And then similarly, good homes encourage habitation and heavy competition. So be prepared. There's a thing called dump nesting, which we'll talk about in a little while. They don't love shiny new boxes, so a weathered, moss-covered box is great. If you have a box that's in mostly good shape but needs a new roof, resist the urge to build a new box. Instead, just repair the roof. And it's never too late. Sometimes ducks have a failed clutch and they'll try later in the season. And getting up a new box in April or early May, it might not get used this year, but having it up all year will help it weather and be more attractive for that pair next year.
Okay. So, all right. So you've got your nest boxes and you're managing them. What should you be watching for during the season?
Well, first I like to look for wood duck activity in general. I tend to see wood ducks as soon as the ice clears in the winter. I even have some photos of wood ducks guarding a box while there's snow and ice on the lake. But also start looking for them in trees. Most people don't think of ducks as sitting in trees, but that's why these are called wood ducks. They've got claws on their feet. They're made for perching. There are only perching duck in the Northeast, but they're very good at it. And so it's a good time of year to see them in trees, particularly because there's not leaves on the trees yet. And if you see them in the trees around boxes, that's a really good, healthy sign. Next is the dump nesting dilemma. This happens when there's heavy competition for a nest box and more than one hen is using it. So I mentioned earlier that a hen will come in the morning, lay an egg, and not come back till the following morning. Well, maybe at 7 a.m. she lays her egg. And maybe at 8:30 another hen comes along and finds the box and says, oh, this is a great nest box, and goes in and pokes around and lays another egg.
Oh, no.
And then hen 1 comes back tomorrow at 7 a.m. and lays her egg too. And then hen 2 comes back at 8:30 and lays her egg too. Now you have 4 eggs in there. This could go on until one of the hens wins out or decides to start incubating the clutch. And there might be 18, 24 eggs or even more in that box. And it sounds like a problem, I can tell by your reaction.
What do you do? I don't want any of the babies to not be okay.
Well, you let nature take its course, and one of the hens will take over responsibility for that and incubate the whole lot of eggs. And the only limiting factor is her body heat. So depending on the arrangement and her skill at moving the eggs around, there's a good chance that most or all of those, say 24 eggs, will hatch for that one mama.
And then she's got to take care of 24 babies all by herself?
Yes, but she doesn't really... Wood ducks don't feed their babies. They take them to the food. So it's mostly just about teaching them where to go and letting them feed themselves and protecting them from predators that could be around. And protecting 24 ducklings from a snapping turtle isn't really much more difficult than protecting 12 of them.
I wish wood duck mamas could speak English, because I would like to know if they agree with you on that.
But there's some really dramatic photography of one hen with like 30 ducklings marching along behind her, and
Oh my goodness.
that's just nature's way. But that happens as a result of egg dumping or dump nesting.
Dump nesting. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm stressed out about this now.
That's particularly common for hooded mergansers. They end up with those quite a bit.
Wow. Okay. Speaking of hooded mergansers, where do they nest?
They nest in our nest boxes too. So by the time wood duck nesting season comes around, often our hooded mergansers have moved further north. But I have had nest box competition from hooded mergansers on our lake. One year we went to Switzerland on vacation in early May, and when we came back, the hooded mergansers were already hatching from there. So that's a good problem to have, right? I welcome them to nest in my nest boxes just like the wood ducks. They deserve just as much support. And it was really fun to see a different style of egg. So you can tell the difference between a wood duck and a hooded merganser egg, because the hooded merganser eggs are kind of rounder, more golf ball shaped, and the wood duck eggs are a little darker brown and a little more oblong, kind of like a chicken egg, like we're used to.
Okay. All right. So so you don't intervene if it's a hooded merganser. Are there any, or if it's dump nesting, are there any situations in which you do intervene?
I don't really intervene with anything in an active nesting cycle, but I will deter interlopers to the nest box prior to nesting season.
Okay.
So if squirrels have taken up a home, my boxes all have a door on the side. I'll prop the door open for a day or two so they feel less secure, and they will relocate their nest. Squirrels often make 2 or 3 nests, and they have a way to vacate their little family to another nest. Sometimes just the act of them like seeing you near the nest gets them nervous enough. I've had times where I saw that squirrels were using the nest, closed it, didn't do anything special, but came back the next day and it was completely vacated.
Yeah, I remember that, because I remember the ladies of the house making it very, very clear that nothing bad was going to happen to those squirrel babies. And I know you wouldn't do anything to them anyways, but yeah.
No.
And they were adorable. Dustin took some pictures of them, and they were the sweetest little things. So I've been saving this question. This is the big one, the most exciting one. You mentioned it already. Jump day. I don't know if our viewers know about what jump day is when it comes to wood duck boxes, but it's the best day of the whole time.
Jump day is the goal for me as a photographer. It's not the primary goal, however. The primary goal is to create good habitat and get successful ducks out into the world. That is the definition of success. But if I can have success and witness it as a photographer, all the better. So jump day is the day that all of the newly hatched ducklings jump out of the box one after another to go start their life out in the world. And it happens the very day after they hatch. So I said that incubation takes about a month. And then once the food inside the egg has been consumed by the embryo that's now a baby duckling, it chips its way out of the egg using its egg tooth, and it starts pipping and chipping and making sounds that arouse the other mature ducklings. So they all start hatching at the same time. And they'll all hatch over a period of a few hours, usually in the afternoon. And then if I happen to be monitoring the box or see it on camera that it was a hatch day, I know the very next day will be jump day, because those babies have nothing to eat inside the box and the mom's not bringing food back to them. But that next morning, when it's time, she's going to do her normal morning routine and fly off and scope for a place to bring them. And then she's going to come back into the box and rest with them for a while longer. And then the next time she comes out of the box, usually, she's calling them, and she coos and chirps and draws them out of the box one at a time. And they all jump out of the box, a big leap of faith out into the big world. And if we can catch that on camera, that's double success.
It's the most adorable thing in the world. And I will say, you said it right there, a leap of faith. I've heard that phrase a million times in my life. I've never seen the purest form of it until I actually saw like photography and video of those babies jumping out of that box. I mean, they do not hesitate. They just leap right out. They hear their mama calling, and that's it. They're going for it.
Yeah, and they've hardly even seen the light of day because it's pretty dark in the nest box, even in bright daylight. So when they scramble up to that hole for the first time and look out, you can sort of see them pause because the sunlight hits them, and then they just jump out and fall down to the water or wherever. So wood ducks will nest even up to like 70 feet high in trees. And those ducklings just jump out and their soft little bodies bounce like ping pong balls and they waddle off to the water after that. So jump day is the holy grail.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So, before we move on to any final thoughts, I just thought of another question for you. For any birders out there who are also photography fans, can you tell them a little bit about what the experience is when you commit to photographing jump day? Because I always have all these amazing ideas of what we could do. Oh, let's capture video and let's do this and let's do that. And you're always reminding me that, like, this is a commitment to decide to do a jump day as a photographer.
That's right. So I set up a blind a couple days in advance near where I know the box is getting ready to have a jump day. And that gives the hens some time to get acclimated to the blind being set up on a dock or nearby in the woods or wherever I happen to be able to accomplish this. And like I said, the Wi-Fi cameras have been a game changer, but I still only am able to do those in boxes right near the house. So often I don't have a blind. I have to find a place to hide. And even if you know jump day is coming, you don't know when it will be. It could be at 7 a.m. It could be at 1 p.m. I've had times where I've in the blind for 4 or 5 hours at a time waiting for a jump day, and then I had to get to work wherever I was going. So I've witnessed jump day 6 times now out of about 60 opportunities. It's just a commitment. And then when it happens, they might all be out of the box in a matter of like 70 seconds or 90 seconds. And this one over here wants me to get video and still photography and video from different angles. And it's not happening because you have to be still in the box. And when the hen comes out and she starts making her coo, you don't want to do anything that could possibly startle her or make her rethink her life choices. So I'm not reaching out of the blind to hit the start button on a camera. Mm-hmm. And not knowing when it's going to come, even having a camera set up on a tripod with a remote trigger isn't always the easiest. So always looking to get better as a photographer, but that will come in time. The goal is to not disrupt the natural process.
I'm curious how many viewers are going to be like, Lynn, how come you don't just sit in the blind with Dustin? And we could do that. We could do that much easier now. I mean, for many years, having a smaller child in the house made that like an impossible. We can't both be sitting in a bird blind for 5 hours with like a school-age child in tow, right?
Yeah, and I started this before Wi-Fi cameras could be used in this way. And so my first couple of jump days were ones where I was manually checking boxes, 10 boxes around the lake twice a week. And I would get lucky and find 1 or 2 of them that were actively hatching so I could do a jump day attempt the next day. And those required getting out in a kayak, hiding in the reeds, or setting up something to block the view. And only twice did those actually pay off, and just still photographs only because I hadn't really gotten into videography yet at all. But that was my goal, is to get that jump. And the first time, it was great. I was astounded I was able to do it a second time. But now it's almost an annual occurrence.
Yeah. And we do have other birder friends that will ask to be in the blind with you. And that's another reason I don't go, because you want them to have an opportunity too, right?
Yeah, and I do have a short little wait list of folks vying for that second seat in the blind.
Vying for the opportunity to sit in a bird blind on a dock in the spring for 5 straight hours, waiting for a bunch of little babies.
With me.
Yes. Okay. So on that note, any final advice or thoughts for our viewers on wood duck nest boxes?
Just remember, this is a little fortress of biodiversity. It's not for just supporting ducks. We're rebuilding it for an entire cavity nesting community. And I'll be sharing videos along the way, hopefully catching jump day.
So if you are interested in wood duck nest boxes and considering doing a project like this yourself, on our Substack newsletter, one of our upcoming posts will be even more detailed information on what you need to consider when it comes to building a wood duck nest box, how to position it, what height it needs to be, all of that fun stuff. But to close out this featured topic of the week, I have a question for all of you who are watching. Do you have any nest boxes that you manage during the spring season? Could be wood ducks, could be bluebirds, could be tree swallows, could be a variety of other birdhouses. If you do, tell us about it in the comments. It's such an exciting time of year for nature lovers. We'd love to hear about your adventures supporting wildlife. So that's all for today's episode. But before we head off on our next adventure, this is just a quick reminder that you can find Dustin's wildlife photography and links to all of our content channels on our website, hikeandhearth.com.
We love being a part of the Nature Lovers YouTube community. So keep sharing your comments on your experiences with us. Tell us all about your nature, wildlife, conservation efforts. And if you're not already subscribed, now's the time.
Yeah, and if you are on Substack, as I mentioned, we are going to have some articles coming out on nest boxes that will get into more details on how Dustin puts his together and some more advice from him on that. So yeah, check us out on Substack at Hike and Hearth Birding. We will be expanding on a variety of topics, so you don't want to miss it. Okay, Dustin, are you ready to send us off for today?
I sure am. Until next time, friends, keep your eyes on the skies and your hearts in the wild.
Bye, everyone.